Hello everybody, welcome to Illuminations with Tiina and Fi. I'm Fi.
I'm Tiina, hi.
Morning Tiina. So today we're actually doing the second instalment as part of our mini-series on extroversion, introversion and ambivert, which we looked at last time. And we've chosen today to explore more about introversion. So Tiina, I shall hand over to you to kick us off.
Yes, it's quite interesting that we obviously have now decided to focus on introversion, considering that we are both introverts. It might be interesting to have somebody who's an extrovert as well here. But introversion. We should both be experts in it, since we know that we both are introverts. When you talk about introversion and extroversion, and obviously being ambivert now as well, people often talk about we shouldn't label ourselves. And I think, shouldn't label ourselves. And at the same time, I think this is not about labeling oneself. It's about creating an understanding of certain maybe behaviors or how you see the world and how you take in the kind of impressions that you get from the world. And as we talked about last time, with introverts, a lot about, how do you get your energy? How do you kind of charge your batteries again? And it's different ways of being, and it just kind of creates an understanding. It's like, okay, that's why I react like that. It's because, I think that's really important when we talk about things like this.
And I think what you talked about last time I felt more comfortable with was preference. It's a preference.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And makes me feel more comfortable rather than labeling me as an introvert, because obviously there are other sides to introversion that we're going to explore today, which adds even more complexity to the whole thing.
Yeah, and that's the important thing as well, as I said, both of us are introverts and we are so different. We really are two very, very, very different people. So it doesn't mean that just because you're an introvert, you're exactly the same as everybody else who's an introvert. And if you're an extrovert, the same. There's many, many other qualities that make up you as the person who you are. So these other things that you said we're going to talk about, do you want to introduce those?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I have only made the link between the two literally while I was preparing for this. So that's fascinating. One of my clients, actually, she recommended this book, which is called The Highly Sensitive Person by Elaine Aron. And Elaine Aron is a psychotherapist, and she trained at the Jung Institute in San Francisco. So it fits in, doesn't it, that obviously that where she might come from, is in her philosophy. But what's really interesting is this was recommended to me because obviously we work with people who are very varied, and I just love any tool that will help me have greater awareness and offer more to my clients. But of course, having read this, it is very interesting, and there's a little test you can do, which is at the front. And of course, being curious, I completed the test. Some of it's a little bit challenging because it goes back to what you're saying. We're not all the same. So there's about maybe, 20 and maybe more. And if you score 12, and I did come out with 12 or more on this. So if you score 12 or more, then you are more of a sensitive person. And this is again the difference between shyness and being more sensitive. So I'm just going to get the definitions, because she actually put them in, the two key factors. So here we go. 2 facts to remember. 1, everyone, highly sensitive person or not, feels best when neither too bored nor too aroused. So that's just the bottom line about all of that. And fact 2, people differ considerably in how much their nervous system is aroused in the same situation under the same stimulation. And I think that's really, really important, because they're like, it goes back to exactly what you were saying about us not all being the same. So I think she actually then talks about being sensitive leads into being more intuitive as well. And she talks about being sensitive as in being very aware of what's going on in the world around you. Like, for example, I remember, one of the test points is I startle easily. I'm famous for leaping about the place if I get a sudden noise. And I remember as a child being in the doctor's with my mum, and the buzzers of the doctor the intercom kept going off, and I was leaping out of my seat, and the doctor said to my mum, "Oh, she's a nervy child. Look at that lovely message going in." And I remember my mother taking me to the Horse of the Year show, and she was a wreck and I was a wreck, because every time the horses went to jump over the defences, I found it so stressful. I was stopping breathing, and she said she would never take me to anything like that again. And that kind of starts to make sense, really. So I don't fit in with all of it. Like, there's a side to me that is a little bit more extrovert, but I did like a lot of time on my own, and time to, have healing, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure. I find I can get quite overwhelmed by, there's a choice, but choose to be, or the state of lots of noise around me, I find a bit, whoa. And yet I worked in London for years. But I think what I did is I learned how to zone out and not hear the noise. So that was the first one. And then a friend of mine recommended this book, Highly Intuitive People by Heidi Sawyer. And she recommended, because I was talking a lot about, energy, and how I was realizing that I can feel people's energy quite a lot. And obviously I call myself an intuitive coach. And she was saying that this book really helped her make sense of that. Now, what's interesting is that Heidi actually refers to the book by Elaine. So she leads out of that research, because Elaine's book is all based in research. She's a doctor and a psychotherapist. And Heidi has based her work on that writing and that research, and has worked for 17 years with people who are highly sensitive, highly intuitive. Now, I must get this bit right. All intuitive, sensitive people are sensitives. Not all sensitives are intuitive. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I'd also like to add to that not all highly sensitive people are introverts. I think it's like 70% of highly sensitive HSPs. HSP? Yeah. Are introverts, but obviously 30% of them are extroverts. Over to you.
And it says, I think it's between 5% of the population are HSP. So it's not a high number anyway. So I suppose that's the thing, isn't it? Is that we're talking about small numbers, and whenever you move into a minority, what both books do is about normalizing it. The way that Heidi says you get over it is by reframing your childhood and adolescence, which of course, I love that because of the NLP work we do. But she gives you ways of actually using the right brain. And I know she acknowledges there's still a lot of discourse about whether there's right brain, left brain, but she talks about how you can move forward on that. She also links in issues and challenges around example, what can happen, like chronic fatigue syndrome, which is quite interesting again, around what happened with me, where I ended up having to work quite a lot on my adrenal system and lymph system because I was quite exhausted. Chronic fatigue, I don't again watch labels, but the other thing is, she says the desire for highly intuitive people is really to know purpose, which is fascinating because that's what I work in, which is interesting, and freedom. And if you had to put my top 3 values, freedom is one of them. I've done, the heart math and all that. It's freedom. So it's fascinating how it kind of helps you to understand and make sense of it. So, and she does 7 steps, which actually you can work through and gradually get a handle on it. But very interesting.
Yeah, it is. I was thinking about this being highly sensitive. So I was reading up on it, and there's this kind of that you just react or feel others, as you called energy, or others, what mood they're in, very, very strongly. And I can relate to that. You know, somebody's irritated or angry or judgmental. It's not just that I notice, oh, that person is irritated, you know, okay, they're irritated. It's just that I feel it inside. It cuts me to the core, you know. It's like, oh, okay, you know, and I've got a hard time dealing with that. And I know that we had a conversation very recently, actually, and I said, because somebody around me was irritated, and I said to you, I recognize those patterns from my childhood. Yes. So then when I read about this highly sensitive people, that they kind of feel others' feelings very, very, like they just don't notice them, they feel them. And for me, it was like, okay, so how do I know if it's because I'm highly sensitive, or if I'm just reliving patterns from childhood, because, you know, that was a pattern that I was kind of used to from a family member. And I kind of learned to kind of know, okay, now that person is irritated, we better watch out, you know. So that was an interesting kind of thing for me to kind of go, and, you know, or is it a combination, or is it that then those patterns make you into a highly sensitive person? I mean, you know.
Yeah. Well, I was on, as you know, I'm on this course, and yesterday morning it was amazing. You know, that is exactly what happens. Is you were probably, you know, they explore it a lot. You were probably as a child, you felt that somebody reacted in a certain way, and then what the memory habit forming part of the brain, the amygdala, what it does is look for confirmation of that, because the brain doesn't like things to be different. It likes to make things, consistent, etc. And so, yes, that then could become a belief. Absolutely. I mean, I think what's really interesting, isn't it, is, I've been, it explains so much for me about why at work, I said maybe last time, I think, I was often presenting, I think I did say this, and my colleagues found it, they just didn't understand this. And I used the word shy, but now I wouldn't. I would just say it's more my introverted preference coming out. And what has been really interesting is living on my own for a while and having, a place to go where I could be quiet. And I suppose refuel, because if you're taking in all this information and feeling all this energy, you need to kind of like refuel. And I think it's taken me a while to get that. When I've lived with people, I traveled a lot with my last job, so I was able to be in hotel rooms on my own, and I loved it. And now I understand why. Even on the train, I would zone out, put on my headsets, watch, and it was a way of me, kind of mini doing it. And so now trying to explain to friends and partners that I need that space. They say it in here, it's like having water. It's as important as water and food. That's really taken a while to put the boundaries down for myself as well, to kind of go, right, it is now time out. I need space to regroup. And if I have a day where, like Saturday, amongst lots of people, very stimulated environment, I was really quite exhausted yesterday. And it's listening to that. That's what Heidi talks about, is becoming in tune with your feelings and staying with them. And so what did I do? I allowed myself sleep in this morning, a bit of extra rest, and I've got a day on my own, refueling. Yeah.
And that really fits into the kind of, once again, it's not about labels, but once you understand your preferences or way of being, you can then understand those feelings as well. Kind of go, okay, now I recognize this. Now I need this. Instead of kind of going, oh, I'm just being silly, or oh, am I being antisocial again, or I'm that kind of blaming voice, and then kind of just keep going the same way because of that. People probably expect this of me. I expect this of myself, and then at the end of that, what happens? Well, then eventually your body will say, you need to stop, and you might get ill. So. It's kind of knowing those signals and kind of go, okay, now I know. Then I don't have to kind of go through that whole thing of getting physically unwell.
Yes.
I'm aware of time. I think we've come to the end. What question would you like to put out there for people to join our conversation with?
Well, I suppose it's in my head. There's something around how do you do self-care as a person who might be more of an introverted preference, either highly sensitive or intuitive. How do you do self-care? And for people who are more of an extrovert preference, is now we've talked about it, what clarity does this bring about some of the people you have around you who would be more of a introverted side? Because Western world, as we said, embraces extroverts. It has often encouraged that, and children in schools, if they're not extroverted and outgoing, as I know at the moment, they're judged in a kind of whole range of ways and tested, and with this understanding, this might help. Thinking of one particular little person in my life. How about those two? So if you are of an introverted preference, how do you carry out self-care for yourself, your mental hygiene? And if you are of an extroverted preference, then how has this kind of raised some awareness for, if you're a parent, your children, or if you're a partner or a friend or a work colleague, how does this raise kind of thoughts in you around working with people like that and understanding them?
Great. It's been wonderful, as always, talking to you.
Yeah, you too, Tiina.
I'll see you next time. I'm sorry.
See you next time. No worries. Bye, Tiina.
Bye.